The dawn mist clung to the damp forest floor, while shadows stretched across the ferns. A lone Proceratosaurus moved with calculated patience through the undergrowth. Its slender body swayed low to the ground, its nostrils twitching as it caught the faint scent of life nearby. Hunger carved deep into its frame for days without a proper meal had sharpened its focus. Every step was silent, every breath restrained. A rustle came from the thickets ahead. The predator froze, its amber eyes fixed on the movement. In that fragile moment, silence carried the promise of either survival or starvation. The land that stretched before the Proceratosaurus was alive with the pulse of an ancient world. The ground was blanketed by ferns that rose knee-high, and their feathery leaves shivered under the weight of droplets left behind by the early morning fog. Towering conifers loomed above, forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into streaks of gold and shadow. Rivers carved their way through the valleys, their steady murmur joining with the calls of distant creatures. It was a land untamed where every step carried risk, and every sound whispered of both predator and prey. Proceratosaurus stood among these giants not as the most fearsome predator, but as a hunter of cunning design. Smaller than many rivals, it lacked the sheer bulk of massive carnivores that roamed the land. Its strength lay not in size, but in speed and intelligence and in patience. A crest arched slightly along the top of its snout, giving it a distinctive look, and its slender jaws bristled with sharp teeth perfect for gripping flesh. It was a creature made for pursuit and for striking with precision when the opportunity revealed itself. The environment demanded constant vigilance. Herds of herbivores grazed on cycads and young shoots, yet these herds were protected by their size and alert senses. Thick-skinned, armored species formed lines of defense that few would dare to breach. Even the small, swift-moving prey were not easy to capture. A single misstep could send them fleeing into the dense forest, leaving the hunter weakened by wasted effort. For Proceratosaurus, survival was a delicate balance between hunger and strategy, and each day brought new trials. The morning air carried scents that told a story to those who could read them. The musk of a passing herd drifted faintly from the east. The sharper iron tang of blood lay somewhere to the south, perhaps the remains of a kill left by another predator. Over it all hung the freshness of damp earth and growing plants. Proceratosaurus raised its head, testing the breeze, ears twitching for the faintest hint of motion. To live in this land was to constantly read its signs and act quickly before opportunity was lost. Though not the largest hunter, Proceratosaurus held its place in the web of life with skill. Larger predators stalked the same forest, their heavy footsteps sending vibrations through the soil. They claimed bigger kills and often drove others away with brute force. Proceratosaurus could not challenge them directly, yet it thrived by being adaptable. It moved where others did not. It hunted in places where its lean frame could slip through foliage unnoticed. It fed on what it could catch and often relied on surprise and speed to secure its meals. The world around it was both harsh and beautiful. Sunlight broke through the canopy in shifting patterns, and insects buzzed in swarms above pools of water. Birds with sharp calls darted between branches. Crocodile-like reptiles lurked in the rivers waiting for the unwary. Everywhere life thrived in competition for space and survival. To an observer, the land seemed vibrant, and endless, yet for the creatures that lived there every sunrise carried the weight of uncertainty. For the Proceratosaurus, the coming days would test its resolve. Hunger already gnawed at its sides, so the last hunts had brought little success. The forest grew louder as herds moved in search of water, and predators followed in their wake. Tension hung in the air like the mist itself, heavy and expectant. Somewhere in the shifting shadows of the land, opportunity waited. The hunter's instinct sharpened as it readied itself to meet the challenges that would decide whether it endured or fell to the silence of the ancient earth. The day had carried a tense stillness broken only by the calls of distant animals and the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a passing breeze. Proceratosaurus moved with careful steps, its narrow frame sliding between ferns as it followed a faint trail. Hunger pressed hard against its belly, and its muscles twitched with the need to act. Each breath drew in the scent of the land, and among them was one that pulled its attention with urgency, the musky odor of small prey not far ahead. The forest opened slightly into a clearing where shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy and fell across the ground in golden stripes. There in the middle of the space, a group of small ornithopods grazed, their heads dipping to feed on tender shoots. They were quick animals built for running, their bodies lean and legs powerful. A direct chase would be risky, yet their presence stirred something fierce within the hunter. The balance between need and chance weighed heavily in that moment. Proceratosaurus lowered itself closer to the ground, eyes fixed upon the nearest of the herd. The air vibrated faintly with the sound of their chewing and the soft thumps of shifting feet. Each movement had to be precise, for a single snap of a twig could send an entire group bounding away into the trees. The hunter's claws flexed against the soil, leaving faint impressions as its body tensed to the strike. Suddenly a sharp cry cut through the clearing. One of the ornithopods raised its head, ears flicking and eyes wide. In an instant the group froze, their bodies caught between stillness and panic. The hunter knew the window was vanishing. With a burst of speed, Proceratosaurus lunged forward, jaws wide and claws ready. The clearing erupted in chaos as the herd scattered in every direction, their feet pounding the ground. In a storm of motion, Proceratosaurus targeted the one that had been slowest to react. It snapped its jaws with a crack of teeth, catching the tail of the fleeing creature. The ornithopod squealed, thrashing violently, its legs kicking as it struggled to escape. The hunter tightened its grip, dragging the prey backward with ferocious effort. But the resistance was stronger than expected. The prey twisted with desperate strength and tore free, leaving only a mouthful of flesh behind. Blood filled the hunter's mouth, hot and metallic yet unsatisfying. The prey bolted into the undergrowth and vanished from sight. The clearing fell silent again, save for the sound of Proceratosaurus breathing heavily from a failed strike. Hunger still clawed at its insides, and the sting of failure settled deep into its bones. It circled the clearing for several moments, its eyes scanning for any sign of the herd. Broken stems and churned soil marked their frantic flight, but the trail quickly grew faint as the forest swallowed them. To chase them now would be useless. The energy spent would outweigh the hope of success. Frustration surged, but so too did a new awareness. The scent of blood, though faint, carried with it the possibility of opportunity. Following the trail of blood, it moved cautiously deeper into the woods. The forest grew darker, the canopy closing tighter above, and the air heavy with damp earth. The sound of water trickled faintly in the distance, hinting at a stream. It moved silently, its body weaving between tree trunks and ferns, eyes sharp for any sign of weakness in its surroundings. The blood scent grew stronger, though mixed now with another scent heavier, sharper, filled with danger. Then the forest opened again to reveal what had caused it. The injured ornithopod lay collapsed near the stream's sides, heaving with shallow breaths. But Proceratosaurus was not the first to find it. Across the clearing, another predator crouched over the dying creature. Larger and bulkier, it tore into the flesh with deep bites. Blood stained its snout as its eyes lifted to meet the newcomer's gaze. The rival hunter growled low, a deep sound that vibrated through the air. Proceratosaurus froze, its body tense, as it weighed the risk of advancing further. The prey was vulnerable, and within reach, yet the presence of another predator changed everything. Hunger and caution collided within the hunter's mind. One step forward could lead to a kill claimed, or it could mean a fight that tested survival itself. The moment stretched thin, filled with the pounding of blood and the echoes of the forest. The choice now would alter the course of the days ahead. Proceratosaurus lowered its head, slightly, teeth bared, as it prepared to decide between retreat and challenge. The forest stood still around the stream, its quiet surface broken only by the faint ripples of insects dancing above the water. Proceratosaurus remained motionless in the shadows, its gaze fixed upon the scene across the clearing. The wounded ornithopod lay limp at the edge of the stream, yet its final moments were not the prize now. Another predator had already claimed it. The rival was a young but powerful Allosaurus, its body larger and more muscular than Proceratosaurus, though not yet at full adult size. Its hide carried scratches of past battles, and its stance held the confident arrogance of a creature used to dominance. Blood dripped from its jaws, staining the water with crimson threads that spread like smoke. Its eyes locked onto Proceratosaurus with a mixture of warning and challenge. Proceratosaurus felt the air tighten. Hunger gnawed at its belly, urging it forward, yet instinct whispered caution. The Allosaurus was not a foe to confront lightly. A single misstep could end in torn flesh and broken bones. Still, the scent of blood and the taste of opportunity lingered in the air like a cruel temptation. The smaller predator crept closer, each step silent, yet deliberate, its body low and tail swaying for balance. The Allosaurus lowered its head, growling deep and rumbling like distant thunder. Muscles rippled beneath its hide as it spread its stance wider, guarding the carcass. With one sudden snap of its jaws, it sent a warning bite into the air. Sharp teeth clashed with a sound that echoed off the trees. Proceratosaurus froze, its eyes narrowing. To retreat would mean more hunger, more days of weakness, and perhaps death from starvation. To advance meant risk, yet it also meant reward. The forest seemed to lean in around them, as if waiting for the choice. Finally, Proceratosaurus let out a shrill cry, a piercing sound that cut through the clearing. It darted forward, its speed giving it a momentary edge as it lunged toward the flank of the rival. Allosaurus roared in fury, swinging its head with jaws snapping shut inches from the smaller predator's side. Proceratosaurus swerved agile as a dart, and its teeth scraped across the larger hunter's shoulder, leaving shallow marks. The clash was brief and violent, a test rather than a full battle. Allosaurus charged, forcing Proceratosaurus to retreat into the undergrowth, its smaller body weaving between trees too tight for the larger hunter to follow. The young giant roared its frustration, but returned to the carcass, tearing into it with renewed fury. From the shadows, Proceratosaurus watched, its chest heaving from the exertion. It had not won the prize, but it had learned something. Speed and cunning could turn the balance, if used wisely. The Allosaurus relied on brute strength, yet it lacked the agility to match its smaller rival. Patience would be the weapon. Days passed under the cover of constant tension. Proceratosaurus trailed the larger predator at a distance, its instincts guiding it to shadow the movements of its rival. Whenever Allosaurus brought down prey, Proceratosaurus lingered nearby, scavenging scraps or driving away lesser creatures that dared to approach. It was a dangerous gamble, for one wrong encounter could end its pursuit, yet the hunger made it bold. Each day sharpened the rivalry. At one point, Proceratosaurus claimed a fresh kill of its own, a young Hypsilophodon snatched in a swift ambush. But before it could finish the meal, the Allosaurus emerged, drawn by the scent. Their eyes met across the blood-soaked ground. This time, Proceratosaurus did not back away immediately. It hissed low, circling the carcass, its teeth bared. The Allosaurus growled and stomped forward, scattering dirt with each step. The standoff stretched tense until finally the larger predator lunged. Proceratosaurus leapt aside, dodging with speed, and darted forward to snap at its leg. Teeth grazed flesh, drawing blood, and a roar of pain burst from the giant. Yet the counter came swift as a massive tail swung like a hammer, crashing against Proceratosaurus's side. The smaller predator staggered, crashing into the undergrowth, breath knocked from its lungs. By the time it recovered, the Allosaurus had claimed the kill once more. Pain burned along its ribs, yet the fire inside Proceratosaurus only grew. It had drawn blood from its rival, a reminder that size did not guarantee dominance. The forest whispered its endless challenge, and the smaller hunter accepted it silently. Nights in the forest carried a different tension. Under the glow of the moonlight, shadows stretched long across the ground, and the sounds of creatures shifted to calls of the nocturnal hunters. Proceratosaurus prowled through the dark, its senses heightened by hunger. The trail of its rival lingered faint in the cool air, but another scent drew its attention. The smell of fresh blood mingled with salt carried from a direction where the trees gave way to open marshland. It followed the scent to find Allosaurus again. The larger predator had dragged down a massive carcass of a stegosaur near the marsh, its body glistening with sweat and blood from the effort. The stegosaur lay sprawled, its spiked tail limp, and its armor plate stained with gore. Allosaurus fed noisily, its jaws ripping chunks of flesh free. This was no small kill, and Proceratosaurus knew it could not hope to steal the carcass outright. Yet the sight of such bounty carved a hole deeper into its resolve. Hunger screamed louder than fear. It crept closer to the reeds, every muscle ready to spring if opportunity showed itself. But this time the opportunity came not from weakness in the rival, but from the environment itself. As Allosaurus fed, it failed to notice the marsh soil beneath its feet softening with the weight of its movements. The ground sank slightly, water pooling around its ankles. With each step, the mire thickened, clutching at its limbs. The young giant bellowed in irritation, tugging to free itself from the mud. Proceratosaurus's eyes gleamed with realization. The marsh could be an ally. It darted from the shadows and rushed forward, not toward the carcass, but toward the trapped predator. Its teeth sank into the soft flesh of the rival's leg, once more this time tearing a deeper wound. Allosaurus roared, thrashing violently, the mud sucking at its weight. A massive foot lashed out, catching Proceratosaurus across the chest and sending it tumbling back with a painful crack. Bruised and battered, the smaller hunter scrambled upright, its breast ragged. The gamble had failed to bring victory, yet it had sown chaos. Allosaurus tore itself free of the mud, furious and bleeding. It glared at the smaller predator, its roar shaking the marshland. Proceratosaurus retreated into the darkness, knowing the fight had not ended. It had only begun. In the following days, the rivalry escalated into constant shadow war. Each encounter carved new scars upon their bodies. Proceratosaurus struck at flanks, stole fragments of kills, and vanished into the undergrowth. Allosaurus gave chase, but its size slowed it in the tangled forest. Neither could fully dominate the other, and so the struggle became a cycle of battles unfinished. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the inevitable end. Storms rolled across the land, drenching the earth, and making the trails slick with mud. Prey grew scarce as herds migrated to safer grounds, leaving predators desperate. Hunger carved deeper into Proceratosaurus's frame, its ribs showing beneath its skin, yet its eyes burned with a fire of defiance. The rival loomed always near its presence, a shadow that could not. The storm had passed, yet its echo lingered in the damp air. Trees dripped steadily, the forest floor slick with mud, and the distant rumble of herds retreating carried across the land. Proceratosaurus crouched low within the ferns, its body tense, its eyes fixed upon the clearing ahead. The herd of herbivores had moved on, but one juvenile had strayed behind, injured from the journey. Its gait was uneven, its body trembling, as it searched for the safety of the group. For any predator, this was a moment of opportunity. Proceratosaurus knew it, and so did the rival. Allosaurus appeared at the far end of the clearing, massive and scarred from their previous clashes. Its head swung side to side, eyes burning with hunger and fury. Its tail lashed mud into the air as it stepped forward, blocking the path of the weakened juvenile. The young herbivore froze, letting out a desperate bleat, but it was already doomed. Proceratosaurus felt the instinct to lunge, yet its rival's presence forced hesitation. Hunger screamed, but so did caution. This would not be a chance to steal scraps. This was a decisive moment when dominance would be claimed or forever lost. The Allosaurus roared and lunged toward the juvenile. In that instant, Proceratosaurus burst from the undergrowth, its shrill cry cutting through the forest. It sprinted across the mud faster than thought, teeth bared, and eyes locked not on the prey, but on the predator itself. Allosaurus swung its massive head, snapping its jaws in fury. Proceratosaurus darted sideways, the rush of air from those teeth grazing its hide. Its momentum carried it beneath the larger hunter's chest, where it raked claws across the softer flesh. Blood sprayed, painting the mud with streaks of crimson. The giant bellowed in rage and struck with a heavy foot. Proceratosaurus rolled aside just as the ground shattered where it had stood. Mud splashed high into the air. With a whip of its tail, Allosaurus lashed across the clearing, striking Proceratosaurus full across the ribs. Pain burst like fire, and the smaller predator staggered, almost falling. But it did not stop. Survival had carved into its instincts the knowledge that hesitation was death. It darted back, circling fast, its small size weaving around the bulk of the larger hunter. Its jaws snapped at the flank, biting deep into muscle. Allosaurus roared, spinning to catch its foe, but Proceratosaurus released and darted clear before those terrible jaws could close. The ground churned beneath them as predator clashed with predator. Teeth flashed, tails whipped, and the clearing rang with cries of fury. The juvenile herbivore limped away, forgotten in the chaos, as the true battle unfolded. Allosaurus lunged again, jaws wide enough to snap bone in an instant. Proceratosaurus leapt sideways, but the mud betrayed it slick and treacherous beneath its feet. Teeth grazed its back, tearing shallow wounds, and blood ran hot down its side. The smaller predator screeched in pain, yet the fire of defiance burned hotter still. It darted forward in a blur, aiming not for the body but the throat. Its teeth clamped down on the loose skin of the neck, though not deep enough to end the fight. Allosaurus reared, shaking violently, throwing the smaller hunter aside like a rag. Proceratosaurus crashed into the mud, chest heaving, body slick with blood and rainwater. The world spun, yet its eyes never left rival. Every muscle ached, every breath burned, but surrender was not in its nature. Slowly it rose again, standing on trembling legs, its cry ringing defiance through the storm-drenched forest. Allosaurus lowered its head, ready to finish the battle. Blood dripped from its wounds, but fury drove it forward. It charged across the clearing, each step shaking the ground. Proceratosaurus waited crouched low, eyes sharp and focused. At the final instant, it sprang sideways with all the strength left in its battered body. The larger predator overshot momentum, carrying it into the softer mud. At the edge of clearing, its weight sank deep into the ground, pulling its legs down as it struggled for balance. Proceratosaurus seized a chance. It darted forward again, leaping high, with a burst of desperate power. Its teeth found the throat, once more this time clamping harder, driven by hunger and fury. It tore and wrenched, ignoring the thrashing claws and tail that battered its body. Blood gushed hot across its jaws, choking yet driving it further. The roar of Allosaurus rose into the night, a terrible sound of rage and agony that echoed through the trees. It staggered, wildly crashing against the earth, its limbs clawing for freedom. But the smaller predator held fast, jaws locked with relentless determination. At last the giant's movement slowed, its roars fading into a wet gurgle. Its eyes dimmed, its body collapsing heavy into the mud. The ground shook as silence fell across the clearing, broken only by the ragged breaths of the victor. Proceratosaurus released its grip, stumbling back. Its body trembled with exhaustion, wounds burning across its hide. It stood over the fallen giant chest, heaving, blood dripping from its jaws. For a long moment it simply stared at the rival that had haunted its every hunt. Then it let out a cry not of hunger, but of triumph. The forest was quiet, as if acknowledging the outcome. The juvenile herbivore had vanished into the trees, leaving only the carcass of the fallen predator. Rain dripped steadily, cleansing the mud of blood, yet the scent of victory lingered. Proceratosaurus stood swaying yet unbroken. It had faced the shadow of its world and survived. The hunger that had driven it now found its answer in the body of its rival. But more than that, it had claimed something greater. It had claimed dominance. The clearing lay silent after the storm of violence. Rainwater pooled in the churned mud, the body of the fallen Allosaurus lying motionless in the center. Its bulk loomed like a toppled tree, its dark blood running into rivulets that fed the thirsty ground. The forest, which had once echoed with roars and screams, now returned to a hushed stillness broken only by the call of distant birds. Proceratosaurus stood over the carcass, its body trembling with exhaustion. Each breath was ragged, each movement slow and deliberate. Wounds burned across its flanks, shallow cuts stinging, while deeper gashes leaked steady streams of blood. Yet none of it mattered in that moment. Against impossible odds it still stood, while its rival lay defeated. For a long time it did not move, its head tilted as if waiting for the larger predator to stir again, to rise and renew the clash. But Allosaurus did not rise. The mighty jaws that once snapped bones with ease now gaped slack and lifeless. The eyes, once bright with rage, were dull stones staring at nothing. Only then did Proceratosaurus lower itself to the carcass. Its jaws tore into the thick hide, pulling away strips of flesh. The taste of warm blood filled its mouth, rich and heavy. Hunger that had driven it for endless days finally found its answer. Each bite restored strength, though its body protested with pain at every motion. As it fed, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Creatures that might have scavenged lingered at the edges, but none dared approach. The scent of blood carried far, yet so did the scent of victory. Proceratosaurus stood as proof that this kill belonged to it alone. The juvenile herbivore, long forgotten, had vanished into the trees, escaping, while predator clashed with predator. It would live another day, its fate no longer tied to this battle. Life moved on as it always did, yet for Proceratosaurus the world had shifted. Night deepened overhead, stars breaking through torn clouds. The cool air soothed wounds, though every step remained a struggle. After feeding until its belly swelled, it dragged itself to a patch of ferns away from the body and lowered down. Muscles twitched from strained eyes, heavy with exhaustion. Yet sleep did not come easily. The sound of the forest pressed close. Insects hummed, frogs croaked, and the steady drip of rainwater echoed like distant footsteps. Every rustle stirred instinct, forcing weary eyes to snap open. It knew the danger was not gone. Scavengers would come, perhaps smaller predators, perhaps even others of its own kind drawn by the promise of flesh. Still it had no strength to defend forever. The kill was large enough to feed many mouths, and though pride burned hot within its survival came first, it would take what it could then vanish before challengers arrived. Victory was enough. It did not need to linger in arrogance. At dawn, the first scavengers appeared. Small, feathered dinosaurs crept from the shadows, bright eyes gleaming. They circled the carcass, chattering, nervously aware of the predator that had claimed it. Proceratosaurus rose with effort, issuing a sharp hiss that sent them scattering back into the brush. It fed again, tearing fresh meat from the flank of the fallen hunter. But even as it fed, it knew the time had come. Larger threats would not be far behind. The forest carried whispers of hunger on every wind, and the carcass would call them like a beacon. To remain was to invite death anew. So with bloody jaws and a heavy stomach, it turned from the clearing. Its steps were slow yet steady, its path leading into the shadowed undergrowth with a sense of ferns and damp soil masked the trail. Behind it, the body of Allosaurus remained a monument to the struggle, a silent reminder of triumph. The forest closed around it, swallowing its figure into green shadows. The cries of scavengers returned emboldened once more as the victor slipped away. Soon the carcass would be stripped of bone by many mouths, yet the memory of who had brought it down would linger in every mark, every torn wound carved by smaller teeth. Proceratosaurus moved deeper into the wilderness, carrying scars that would never fade. It had risked everything and emerged alive. The hunger that had once been endless was sated for now, but survival demanded more than a single victory. The land was vast of dangers, unending, and somewhere out there new rivals already prowled. Still in the hush of morning light, a quiet triumph settled upon it. The storm had broken, a rival had fallen, and the path ahead was its own to claim. The forest shimmered in the early light of dawn as mist curled around towering ferns, and the air buzzed with the awakening of countless small lives. Proceratosaurus moved slowly through the undergrowth, its body sore from the battle that had nearly ended it. Each step pressed against damp soil, leaving faint imprints that would soon be washed away by rain or hidden by new growth. Yet in that moment each mark felt like a declaration. It still walked where others had fallen. The carcass of the Allosaurus lay far behind, now claimed by scavengers and buzzing insects. The echoes of that fight would linger in memory, but the forest no longer carried its scent. What remained was silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the steady rhythm of breath. Proceratosaurus had faced death and emerged scarred but alive. That truth carried a weight greater than victory itself. It paused beside a shallow stream, lowering its head to drink. The cool water soothed its parched throat, washing away the taste of blood that still clung to its teeth. Ripples spread across the surface where its snout touched, and for a moment it saw its reflection fractured and fleeting. The scars across its hide were clear, but in the reflection those scars seemed less like weakness and more like proof. Each wound told a story, each mark a reminder that survival came at a price, yet it had paid that price willingly. The hunger that once gnawed without end was quiet, now replaced by a heavy calm. The feast on the fallen predator would last for days, though it could not remain near the kill. The decision to walk away had been as much about survival as it had been about pride. Staying would mean endless battles with scavengers and challengers. Leaving meant continuing forward, carrying strength and scars into a world that never stopped testing. As it traveled deeper into the wilderness, new scents filled the air. The musk of herds drifted across the wind, mingled with the fragrance of wet foliage and distant earth. The forest teemed with possibilities, both prey and peril waiting beyond the next rise of land. Proceratosaurus moved with renewed caution, but also with newfound confidence. It had faced a rival larger and stronger than itself and prevailed. The knowledge of that fact shifted something within it. No longer did it hunt as a shadow cowering from threats. Now it walked as one who had earned a place through struggle. Midday light poured through the canopy, casting golden shafts across the ferns. A small flock of feathered dinosaurs darted away at its approach, chattering as they vanished into the brush. Larger creatures roamed in the distance, their shapes half hidden by trees. Proceratosaurus did not rush toward them. Instead, it rested at the edge of an open glade, watching, studying, waiting. Its instinct, sharpened by victory, reminded it that patience was as vital as teeth and claws. Hours passed in quiet stillness until a small group of herbivores strayed close to drink from a pool. They were not as large as a massive prey it once dreamed of chasing, but they were enough. The hunger that had once driven recklessness now urged strategy. Moving low and silent, it circled until the wind favored its scent. Then with a sudden burst, it struck swift, precise, and merciless. The hunt ended quickly, the prey falling with little struggle. As it fed again, the forest echoed with life, continuing as it always had. Yet something had changed within this predator. It had crossed through fire and blood and emerged with more than just survival. It carried the memory of triumph, a memory that would guide its steps in the endless cycle of hunger and pursuit. The sun dipped low shadows lengthening across the land. Proceratosaurus lifted its head from the fresh kill, its eyes glinting with quiet fire. The world was harsh, unrelenting, filled with predators and rivals, yet for now it was alive, it was strong, and it had proven that even a smaller hunter could carve a place among giants. In the fading light, it turned from the carcass and walked into the depths of the forest. The mist closed around it, the sounds of life rising once more. The story of that battle, the scars on its body, and the victories yet to come would live on with each step it took. Survival was not guaranteed, but for now Proceratosaurus had earned another day,